Do you not think yourself strong?
Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. I have a tender spot for cripples, bastards, and broken things. When Tyrion Lannister said these words, we became fans of not only him, but the entire franchise. The world of ice and fire is wondrous and magical, but it is also bloody, and can often be cruel for no reason other than for the sake of cruelty. None know this pain better than bastards, who have to work their way up in life just because they were born on the wrong side of the sheets. Just ask Jon Snow how amazing his life has been growing up at Winterfell. But Jon was the presumed bastard of a man whose honor was his identity. The bastard sons of other noblemen and women have things easier. A child born out of wedlock can rise in the world, becoming Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, or becoming Lord Paramount of a former kingdom, or even being named the heir to the Iron Throne, which, bizarrely enough, has happened twice in the main timeline. The second time is when Cersei passes off her children through Jaime as Roberts. The first is the subject of this video, Prince Jacaerys Velaryon, Prince of Dragonstone and the eldest strong boy of Rhaenyra Targaryen. Jace lived a shorter life than most, but his was marked for fire and blood since it began. For he was the linchpin to his own mother's downfall, and this is his origin explored. Also, spoiler alert before you move forward, because you'll need it. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
To Prince Aegon and Prince Aemond.
He's the firstborn son of the first prospective queen of Westeros, Jacaerys Velaryon's birth. Prince Jacaerys Velaryon was born in 114 AC to Sir Leonor Velaryon and his wife, Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, heiress to the Iron Throne. Jace's birth was great cause for celebration for his mother and his grandfather, King Viserys. The royal line was secure now that Viserys' heir had an heir of her own, and Prince Jacaerys was, by all accounts, a strapping and healthy young boy. His father, Sir Leonor, wanted to name his son Joffrey after his fallen friend and rumoured lover, Sir Joffrey Lonmouth, but was overruled by his own father and Jace's grandsire, the Sea Snake himself. Lord Corlys Velaryon was a man as ambitious as he was legendary, and had once failed to win the Iron Throne for his house when he wed Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Now that he had the chance to right that wrong, he wasn't going to let his son's paramour's name be etched in the annals of history. He named his grandson Jacaerys, keeping with Velaryon tradition. Jacaerys was a proud and ancient name, the Sea Snake argued, much like the name Gaemon in Targaryen history. He wanted his grandson to bear a true Velaryon name when he ascended the Iron Throne as the King of Westeros, so that his house itself would be immortalized in the years to come. However, these grandsires and immediate parents were the only ones who were delighted at Jace's birth, for it was also the cause of much scrutiny and scorn from the royal rivals of Princess Rhaenyra, the Greens of House Hightower. At the time of Prince Jacaerys' birth, there existed two factions at court. One, the Blacks, was loyal to her mother Rhaenyra's claim. The other, the Greens, were loyal to her half-brother and the king's firstborn son Aegon's claim. Jace's mother had never been especially fond of her half-siblings, taking care to address them as such whenever she did speak of them, and they had returned her attitude towards them in kind. The reason for this split in the royal family was simple and yet complicated at the same time. King Viserys Targaryen had ruled for a few years without a male heir. His brother Daemon was his heir presumptive, but Viserys never officially bestowed the title of Prince of Dragonstone on him, for he thought Daemon unfit for rule. And yet, because Rhaenyra, his eldest living child, was a girl, she could not inherit the Iron Throne based on the precedent set at the Great Council of 101 AC. Viserys was hopeful for a male heir through his queen Aemma Arryn, but she died in childbirth, and Viserys' long-desired son Baelon died a day after his mother. So Viserys decided to put the matter of succession to bed and named his daughter Rhaenyra heir, having all the lords of the Seven Kingdoms swear in front of the Iron Throne that they would defend her rights as the next queen of Westeros. This could have been a revolutionary proclamation had the king remained childless besides Rhaenyra, except he went and remarried a few months after naming her Princess of Dragonstone, and then had 3 children with his second wife, 2 of them sons, and one of them even named Aegon. His wife, Queen Alicent Hightower, had a warm relationship with Rhaenyra at first, but after her second son was born, things went downhill pretty quickly. When Viserys was considering worthy consorts for his daughter, Alicent put forth her son Aegon as a choice, but was rejected because Viserys realized that she only wants her own blood on the throne. So he reached to an old ally that his house had wronged in an attempt to set things right. House Velaryon had been alienated by Jacaerys and Viserys politically when the old king passed over Rhaenys in favor of Baelon and the young king passed over Rhaenyra Velaryon in favor of Alicent Hightower. Viserys betrothed Rhaenyra to Sir Rhaenyra Velaryon and they were married at the start of 114 AC, with Jace being born toward the end of that year. But while his two grandsires remained blind to the obvious, his step-grandmother did not. The young princeling looked nothing like his own Lord Father, and that was a sign of high treason.
Is Harwin strong, my father?
A strong boy and a dragon rider. Jace's early years. Any arguments about Jacaerys' paternity reaching the royal court can be thought of as the king's fault. Not a few months had passed when Rhaenyra announced her pregnancy that Alicent revealed she herself was pregnant as well. And so a few months after Jace's birth, his third uncle Daeron entered the world, all red-faced and hearty, and most importantly, Targaryen-looking. All of Alicent's children had the classic Targaryen look, silver gold hair and purple eyes that marked them as the blood of the dragon. But Rhaenyra's son curiously had brown eyes and hair, and a pug nose that looked a lot like it belonged to her sworn shield, Harwin Strong. Instead, these differences can be put down to genetics in the real world, of course, but in George Martin's creation, genetic features tend to get carried on through generations, and when a child is born without them, their paternity is immediately under suspicion. Also didn't help that in his attempt to bind his sons and grandsons together in unity, Viserys proclaimed that Jace and Daeron would be milk brothers, because then he was practically flaunting his grandson's illegitimate birth in his wife's face, though he seemed to be too blissfully ignorant of it at the time. Courtiers began observing the stark difference in the looks of the two princes, and thereafter the rumors of Rhaenyra's children being bastards fathered by Sir Harwin began being whispered in the Red Keep. The princess would do herself no favors in dispelling them either. Jace welcomed his younger brothers Lucerys and Joffrey in short order, with Luke being born in 115 AC and Joff being born in 117 AC. One son not having the coloring of a Targaryen can be understood, but all three of Rhaenyra's sons took after Sir Harwin, and this gave Alicent the incentive to begin spreading rumors about her children's true parentage in an attempt to get her disinherited. This is because if it was true that Rhaenyra's sons were born out of wedlock, then they would be bastards and have no true claim to the Iron Throne. Rhaenyra would have technically committed high treason if her son Jacaerys ascended the Iron Throne, and would be eligible for the death penalty as a consequence. The Greens might have hoped to win over people to their side without an issue if these were the children of any other house, but the princess herself was of the blood of the dragon, and while her sons did not show a trace of it on their faces, they carried more than enough of it in their veins. In the days of King Jacaerys Targaryen, Queen Alysanne practically made it a custom to place a dragon's egg in the cradle of a royal babe, in the hopes that it would better stimulate the dragon bond between the babe and the hatchling. Jacaerys and Alysanne themselves had received the eggs of Vermithor and Silverwing in their cradles from their eldest sister, Rhaenyra, thus starting a royal tradition. Though the probability of any dragon's egg ever hatching was about 50%, whenever a royal babe's egg hatched in the cradle, it was taken as a sign that they were true signs of the blood of the dragon. Because Rhaenyra's children were bastards, surely their dragon eggs would not hatch, therefore exposing their mother's sins, right? Well, you, much like Alicent, have to be let down here because all three of Rhaenyra's children received dragon eggs laid by her own mount, Syrax, and all three eggs hatched into healthy and thriving hatchlings. The youngest, Joffrey, was bound to Tyraxes. Rhaenyra's second son, Lucerys, was the rider of the pearlescent dragon Arax, and Jacaerys had bonded with the formidable and fight-capable Vermax, whose coloring is not mentioned in Fire and Blood, but we are told that he was growing rapidly. With the hatching of the dragons of Rhaenyra's children, the matter of their legitimacy was no longer an open debate from the Targaryen side of things. Instead, their quarrel shifted to coexisting, something neither the princess or the queen wanted to do, and nor did their sons. Though Rhaenyra would divide her time between Dragonstone, Driftmark, and King's Landing, whenever she came to the third location, chaos would ensue due to her father's insistence on peace. Viserys had decreed that to increase the brotherhood between Rhaenyra and Alicent's children, the three would spend their time learning and training and playing together. The 6 princes would take lessons from the same maester, learn arms from the same master-at-arms, attend the same balls and feasts, and generally do everything together. Instead of making their bond stronger, it drove them further apart, and it didn't help that Jace and Luke were betrothed before either of Alicent's sons. In 118 AC, Rhaenyra, with the leave of her father the king, betrothed her eldest sons to the twin daughters of her good sister, Rhaenyra Velaryon, and her husband, Prince Daemon Targaryen. Jace, 4, was promised to Baelor, who was 2 at the time. Thus began a betrothal that would last all of the prince's life, and one that made the Green Queen's life hell as well, because now the Velaryons were bound to Rhaenyra by marriage and blood. She could have relied on the illegitimacy of Rhaenyra's children to disinherit her, but if all of the Sea Snake's grandchildren were married to each other, then she couldn't do something about it openly, unless she wanted to risk angering the richest man in the 7 kingdoms. But, as fate would have it, Alicent did not even need to intervene in the matter, because her sons had learnt well. In the year 120 AC, Sir Rhaenyra Velaryon, the reported father of the 3 royal princelings, died after a disagreement with his companion Sir Carl Corrie. The entire royal court attended his funeral, including Viserys' children by Alicent. Out of all the royal children, only Viserys' second-born son Aemond was dragonless, a fact that pricked at the young prince's pride. So he decided that he shall have the largest dragon of them all, and picked Vhagar for his own mount. Aemond stole into Vhagar's stables on Driftmark in the middle of the night, intent on claiming her, but was found by his youngest nephew Joffrey. A brief scuffle ensued that saw Aemond drop Joff in a mound of dragon droppings and take off on Vhagar's back. But when he landed, he was greeted by not 1 Velaryon prince, but 3. Joff had called his brothers for backup, and Jace, who was 6 at the time, had already become somewhat acquainted with the ways of the world. The fight that ensued was one-sided because Aemond, who was much larger at 10 years old, was able to easily swat his nephews around. As he was beating down his nephews, he called them strong boys, and Jacaerys immediately understood the insinuation. He charged Aemond and was nearly beaten bloody until Luke drew a dagger and took out Aemond's eye. The scandal that followed was massive. Alicent demanded Luke's eye be put out as payment. Rhaenyra demanded that Aemond be put to sharp questioning about where he had heard these vile rumors. Aemond pointed the blame at his brother Aegon, who only said that everyone knew Rhaenyra's kids were bastards. All you had to do was look at them. King Viserys decreed that night that any man who spoke against his grandson's parentage and its legitimacy would lose their tongues, and commanded Rhaenyra and her kin to stay at Dragonstone. He also commanded her sworn shield Harwin Strong to return to his seat at Harrenhal and assume his duties as heir, replacing him with Sir Eric Cargill of the Kingsguard. Sir Harwin and his father, Lionel Strong, the Hand of the King, would die soon after reaching their seat in a mysterious fire whose origins are disputed till this day. One way or the other, Jacaerys lost a father in 120 AC and gained one as well, because shortly after all this madness transpired, his mother married his granduncle Daemon in a secret ceremony. So, by the age of 6, Jacaerys had seen a father die and another take his place, realized that he was a bastard and that his real father was dead too, and that his own claim was in threat from his uncles who all technically had better claims to the throne than his own. Perhaps it was because of this that he became so protective of his own kin, even thinking of his half-brothers Aegon and Viserys as highly as he did for Luke and Joff. These facts hardened the boy into becoming a driven individual with a chip on his shoulder, and that is shown in the actions he takes during the Dance of the Dragons.
We must first secure the support of Winterfell, the Eyrie, and Storm's End.
I'll prepare the ravens, Your Grace.
Dragons can fly faster than ravens, and then more convincing.
Rhaenyra's oldest and boldest, Prince Jacaerys, during the Dance of the Dragons. When Jace was still an infant, his grandfather Viserys purportedly told him in front of the entire court that the Iron Throne would one day be his. In hindsight, the king could not have been blinder than he was when making that statement. In 126 AC, the question of the succession of Driftmark became an issue when the Sea Snake fell terribly ill. Because Jace was his eldest living male heir, he should have been the one to inherit the Driftwood throne, but he was already in line to ascend a far more jagged and imposing seat than the ancient throne of the Velaryons. So Jace's mother put her second son Luke up for consideration and urged her good father to name him Lord of the Tides after himself, but this was disputed by Corlys's nephew Vaemond Velaryon. So Vaemond protested the fact that all 3 of Rhaenyra's sons by Rhaenys were actually bastards and therefore not eligible for inheritance. For this, the queen-to-be had him beheaded by her husband and his carcass fed to her dragon. We're not told how Prince Jacaerys reacted reacted to the news himself, but it must not have been a consolation to hear that his grandsire had taken the tongues of Corlys's other nephews and their sons as well. Yet he wasn't deterred from his own birthright. In fact, if anything, he became bolder. The next year, 127 AC, was a tough one for the royal family because King Jacaerys had slipped and cut himself severely on the Iron Throne, and it was feared that he would die. Only when Rhaenyra brought her own Maester Geradis with her was it that the king made a recovery. So when he was back to a good enough state, Jacaerys immediately ordered a feast to be thrown. After he retired from the festivities early, his second son Aemond mockingly toasted his grandsons for their appearance and their strength, calling them 3 strong boys. In response, Jacaerys asked his aunt and Aegon's sister wife Helaena for a dance, which angered him enough for the Kingsguard to have to intervene. So, while Jace is not one to instigate the breaking of bones himself, he is more than happy to dance that dance with you. His political savvy, for one so young, was the perfect quality in a prince that was promised to become king one day, and that came in handy when the dance officially began. 2 years later, Jace's grandsire Jacaerys passed away during a nap, but his family didn't find out until his uncle Aegon had usurped his mother's throne. Archmaester Gyldayn's Fire and Blood notes Sir Criston Cole having said to the Green Council, 7 save this realm if we seat a bastard on the Iron Throne, and we do not doubt him. When word did reach Dragonstone, Jace's mother went into a black rage, causing her to miscarry Jace's half-sister Visenya. The effects of this tragedy were evident in both mother and son. Rhaenyra had a hastily arranged coronation to rival her half-brothers, crowning herself as Queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men. Her husband took the title of Protector of the Realm, while Jace was officially appointed as the Prince of Dragonstone. His first act as the heir to the Iron Throne was to suggest that he and his brother Luke personally act as Rhaenyra's envoys, with Jace arguing that dragons moved faster than ravens and were more convincing. The Queen had her son swear on the 7-pointed star that they would not pick a fight during their missions, which both of them accepted. Luke was sent on the safer mission to Storm's End, whilst Jace was sent on an adventure of sorts. His stops included the Eyrie, where he treated with Lady Jane Arryn. The court fool, Mushroom, insists that Jace had to please the Lady of the Vale in bed first, but you'll see how he likes to plant salacious rumours here and there all the time. Jace next flew to the Three Sisters, where he secured the allegiance of Houses Borrell and Sunderland. At White Harbour, he agreed to betroth his younger brother Joffrey to a daughter of Lord Desmond Manderley, and then Vermax flew Jace north to Winterfell, making Jace the first dragon rider to travel this far north of the Neck since Jacaerys and Alysanne. Vermax was the last dragon to be seen at Winterfell, where Jace signed the Pact of Ice and Fire with Lord Cregan Stark, and promised that his own firstborn daughter, through his betrothed Baelor, would wed Cregan's heir Rickon at a later date. Mushroom alleges that Jace had actually slept with Cregan's bastard half-sister Sarah Snow, and married her secretly to preserve her honour. Septon Eustace claims that the prince tried to convert the Northmen to the faith of the Seven, but Archmaester Gyldayn probably has the best rationale as to why Cregan accepted Jace's offer. The young Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North used to have a brother who looked a lot like Jace, and after hunting and drinking with the Crown Prince, he judged him a man worthy of his trust. Thus was the Pact of Ice and Fire concluded. But it was during this grand adventure that Jace also dealt with extreme grief. Luke died at Storm's End at the hands of his uncle Aemond. Jace's journey was so long that the battle at Rook's Rest had also taken place by the time he returned. It is more likely that he received the news of Luke's death while he was treating with one of the great lords of the North and the East. Having lost a brother so recently himself must have made Jace empathetic to Lord Stark's grief, and vice versa. And so it was that the boy who had left Dragonstone to be his mother's messenger returned to her stronghold a man born anew. He healed the rift between Rhaenyra and Jacaerys Velaryon by naming his grandson Hand of the Queen, and took charge of planning the defences of Dragonstone whilst his father by law was off in the Riverlands. Jace also began plotting an assault on King's Landing, but showed the wisdom to send all his siblings off to safety first. He sent Joffrey and Tyraxes to the Vale alongside Luke's formerly betrothed Lady Rhaena and 3 dragon eggs. Jace had promised Lady Jane that he would protect the Vale with dragons, and though Tyraxes was small, yet he was of riding size by the time the dance began. Jace reached out to the Prince of Pentos, a friend of his father by law Daemon, to foster his half-brothers Aegon and Jacaerys. His own betrothed Lady Baelor Targaryen remained with him on Dragonstone, with her dragon Moondancer, and she wanted to marry the prince immediately, but Jacaerys wished to wait till the war was over. In Fire and Blood, it was the Prince of Dragonstone who proposed the sowing of the dragon seeds, pointing out the many riderless dragons that inhabited Dragonstone. Still, Jace put out the word that any man who was able to tame a wild dragon would be given lands, titles, titles and knighthoods, and his ploy did work, though at a terrible cost. Dozens lost their lives during the event known to history as the Red Sowing, but eventually all but 2 of the wild dragons were tamed. Jacaerys and Corlys were working on the legitimization of one of the dragon seeds when they received word that the Greens had gained an unlikely ally, and worse still, they were almost upon them. The Crown Prince roused his force of dragon riders and rode out to meet the threat himself. Prince Jacaerys Velaryon fought valiantly in the event that is remembered to history as the Battle of the Gullet, managing to protect the Valyrian fleet's stranglehold on Blackwater Bay. But that day, Rhaenyra Targaryen lost yet another child, and the Dance of the Dragons was no longer going to be a defensive game for the Black Queen. After the Battle of the Gullet, she was said to be hardened with new resolve and moved swiftly to take King's Landing, and became such an icy ruler that she's still recalled as King Maegor with teats.
What was that?
Jon Snow plus Joffrey Baratheon equals Prince Jacaerys Velaryon, also known as Jace, in House of the Dragon. If you think about it, this is a very accurate description of the situation that Jacaerys Velaryon finds himself in House of the Dragon. Born around the same time as his uncle Aemond, as opposed to Daeron, Jace is more like a Jon Snow figure stuck in the position of Joffrey Baratheon. We say this because, like Joffrey, Jace is in line to inherit the Iron Throne and become king one day. But like Jon Snow, he's very aware of the fact that he's a bastard. This creates an interesting dilemma from which emerges a boy who had to become a man long before it was his time. Prince Jacaerys Velaryon is one of the more underrated characters in House of the Dragon because you can see on his face, clear as day, just how hard he is trying to live up to every expectation that has been put on him, despite knowing that he does not deserve them. The first time we meet Jace is when he's training in the Dragon Pit alongside his brother Luke and his uncles Aegon and Aemond. You can see that Jace isn't perfect at High Valyrian and can't control Vermax as perfectly as his tutor would expect him to, but he is making progress. Jace, Luke, and Aegon then play a prank on Aemond, which is orchestrated by Aegon, but blamed on Rhaenyra's children by Alicent's. The next time is when Jace and Luke show Rhaenyra the dragon egg they have picked out for their new brother Joffrey, and then we meet Jace training in the yard with the clearly biased Criston Cole as his master at arms that day. Criston puts Jace up against Aegon in a sparring contest knowing that Jacaerys is the inferior swordsman, but to his surprise, Jacaerys does not give up. Sure, he's a little clumsy and can use better form and technique, but he makes up for those things with his sheer strength and endurance, traits that he inherits from the man watching his fight alongside everyone else in the yard. House of the Dragon does not leave much up to the imagination when it comes to the parentage of Rhaenyra's children. It is very clearly Harwin Strong, who is bold enough to advise his children at combat in front of the king. It is also clear that Jace and Luke are also very fond of him, perhaps even more so than they are of their father, and the reason becomes clearer during Jace's spar with Aegon. Harwin chastises Criston's brutal training regimen, and the Kingsguard taunts him for his obvious paternity of Jace and Luke. Harwin snaps and leaves Criston with a broken nose, but Jace is old enough to know what was being alleged here. When Harwin is then made to leave King's Landing, he asks his mother if he is a bastard, but Rhaenyra only tells him it doesn't matter, and he accepts that. Interestingly enough, Jacaerys could have been the rock that could have helped heal the rift between the two factions of House Targaryen. During a small council meeting, Rhaenyra proposes a betrothal between Helaena and Jace. This would have been the perfect match, politically and personally. Aegon was not the sort of man that Helaena should have been married to. That was clear from the moment we met him in person, and unlike Fire and Blood, Jace had not been betrothed since he was like 4 years old. One of the better ways in which House of the Dragon utilized its time skips is by adding in this detail that had Alicent accepted Rhaenyra's offer, the realm would have been united and war could have been avoided. But alas, we know the games that the Hightowers play, and the princess is forced to leave King's Landing by the end of the episode, thanks to the Queen. The next time we meet Jace, he's much older, still trying to perfect his High Valyrian, but clearly determined to get perfect at it. It's the drive that Jacaerys shows to perfect himself that sets him completely apart from Joffrey, who was arguably the most entitled character of the main A Song of Ice and Fire timeline, and makes him so similar to Jon Snow. Unlike Jon, Jace has his mother. He also has her love, and backing. So, of course, he'll do anything he can to ensure that he can be her perfect son, because everything that she does wrong will reflect back on him. Jace is determined to become a good prince of Dragonstone and a great king of the Seven Kingdoms, and to prove to himself and the rest of the court that, true or false, all bastards need not be dishonorable. He goes to the Red Keep with his brother when Vaemond Velaryon makes the petition and witnesses his uncle's decapitation at the hands of his stepdad. But it's his other uncles that loom over him like a scepter. It was at the petition hearing that Jace and Luke were betrothed to Baelor and Rhaenyra, and the feast where Jace asked Helena for a dance happened immediately after, but everything else was different. For starters, Prince Aegon propositioned Jace's betrothed immediately after laying eyes on her, but he gracefully toasted his uncles, despite Aemond rising as if to pick a fight. Viserys himself praises Jace for his toast, and even Rhaenyra looks proud of her son's well-tempered speech. Jace pats Aegon on his shoulder suggestively and gets his uncle to return his toast, but then he does ask Helena for that dance later on, showing he was not one to sit and take things meekly. After Aemond makes his toast, Jace is enraged and flies at his uncle, landing a punch but is shoved down by Aemond almost dismissively. It's clear that Jace has a lot of training to do, so he gets to doing exactly that when his family returns to Dragonstone. Jacaerys is drilling Lucerys at arms when Princess Rhaenys Targaryen arrives with the news of his grandfather's death, and you can tell that he knows war is coming. Jace pushed Luke so hard that even Sir Steffan Darklyn, a knight of the Kingsguard, asks him to ease up. After Jace and Luke hear their mother's commands, Jace goes to try and stop Daemon from plotting his war, but instead ends up getting a lesson in loyalty from his father by law. We keep saying that because Jace is under no illusions about what kind of a man Daemon is, and he's also very aware of his duty and what it entails. After taking said lesson, Jace is present at the council where Corlys Velaryon declares for Rhaenyra and is the one to propose that he and Luke act as envoys. Lord Corlys applauds his suggestion, just as he had once applauded Rhaenyra in the small council, and you can really see that Jace is coming into his own as a man and a crown prince. Out of everyone else that we've seen so far, he's the only one who's taking his duty as a duty. Aegon outright admitted he is not suited for rule. Aemon's outlook on kingship feels more entitled than dutiful. Luke is also not someone who wishes to be lord of anything, but Jace has not only been preparing for his birthright, he also shows the right temperament for it. He's like the ideal what-if scenario for Jon and Joffrey. What would happen if a bastard who knew he was never meant to be a noble, but proved he could be a damn great one anyway, thereby removing the taint of dishonor from all bastards in the realm? You'll not hear Jacaerys say this at any point in the series, but it is clear from the way he tells Luke that all that matters is that they are Targaryens, and that it is this greater desire to prove himself worthy that drives him. Jacaerys Velaryon is going to be the heart of early Season 2 of House of the Dragon, and we dare say he might just become the next Robb Stark of the series. Until then, though, let's revel in knowing that at least one of the 8 crown princes is willing and able to take on the mantle of King of Westeros, and is actually suited for it.
Your lady mother needs to see you. Both of you.
Marvelous verdict. Jace is going to be eternally a sign of what could have been possible had he just been either born different or betrothed to a different girl, or executed a strategy differently, or just done something differently. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a character, he'll closely resemble the emotion of regret, though his fate will only make his mother more remorseless. And perhaps that is what is the saddest thing about all of this, because if House of the Dragon's character interactions are canonical, then Rhaenyra's children think she is perfect. Luke died thinking he could never be as great as his mom, and Jace likely has that same faith in her. It's likely a relief knowing that neither of them will have to see their mother at her worst, because if either of them had seen Rhaenyra reign in King's Landing in her later life, they might have wondered if it would not have been better to pass away with their rumoured father at Harrenhal all those years ago. Jacaerys Velaryon is going to be the biggest what-if in House of the Dragon, and that is a hill we are willing to die upon. But, please try not to kill us all the same. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one. Be safe. Thanks, everyone.
Go to it then.